The rain in Seoul still felt the same, but the woman standing in it was someone new. A year ago, a crushed wedding ring was left in the mud at Pier 7, belonging to a girl who was too kind for her own good. Today, a sharp, red designer heel stepped out of a black limousine and crushed that memory into the dirt. Elena Vance didn't look like a victim. She looked like a storm. Through the tinted glass of her car, she watched the tall gates of the syndicate mansion. She could see Ji-hoon through a distant window, looking tired and stressed, with Mina draped over his shoulder like a greedy shadow. They were celebrating another year of their victory, unaware that the fire they started hadn't turned Hannah to ash, it had turned her into steel. Elena touched the tiny, hidden scar behind her ear, the only reminder of the night her husband chose a liar over his wife. Her heart didn't beat for love anymore, it beat for a countdown. Ji-hoon thought he was the king of the underworld, but he was about to find out that a ghost doesn't follow his rules. The forsaken wife was gone. The queen of revenge had arrived to take back her crown. The city of Seoul looked the same from the window of the private jet, but everything was different for the woman looking down at it. 1 year ago, Hannah had been a shadow, a quiet wife who lived to please a man who hated her. Today, as the wheels touched the runway, that girl was officially buried. In her place stood Elena Vance. She was tall, powerful, and dressed in a suit that cost more than Ji-hoon's favorite car. Her new face was flawless, her eyes were cold, and her heart was locked behind a wall of ice. Under the protection of the third lady, Elena had spent every waking hour preparing for this moment. She didn't just learn how to fight with her fists, she learned how to fight with money. She had studied Ji-hoon's business until she knew his bank accounts better than he did. She knew that his empire was crumbling. Without Hannah there to quietly manage the house and keep things steady, the mansion had become a place of greed and waste. Mina was spending millions on jewelry, and Ji-hoon was making bad deals because he was distracted by his obsession with her. As Elena stepped out of the airport, a line of black cars was waiting for her. Guards who didn't recognize her bowed low, thinking she was just another wealthy investor from Europe. She smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. It was the smile of a predator watching its prey. She had already bought a massive penthouse that overlooked Ji-hoon's territory. She wanted him to feel her presence before he even knew her name. "The stage is set," the third lady said over the phone. Ji-hoon is desperate for a partner to save his shipping company. He is hosting a gala tonight to find an investor. He thinks he's looking for a lifeline, but he's actually looking for his end. Elena looked at a photo of Ji-hoon and Mina on her phone. They looked happy, standing on a yacht, oblivious to the fact that the woman they murdered was back in the city. Elena felt a flicker of the old pain, but she quickly pushed it down. She remembered the cellar, the fire, and the way Ji-hoon had turned his back on her. Tonight, she would walk into that gala. She would see her sister wearing her old perfume and her husband wearing his arrogant crown. She would let Ji-hoon look into her new eyes and watch him fall for the mystery of Elena Vance. She wouldn't just take his money, she would make him love the woman he had tried to kill, only to break his heart when he finally realized the truth. The forsaken wife had returned as the owner of his fate. The game of revenge was finally ready to begin. The following year was not spent in a hospital, but in a secret training camp hidden deep in the mountains. Hannah's world was a blur of white bandages, sharp needles, and the smell of medicine. The third lady had hired the best doctors in the world to fix Hannah's broken body. They performed many surgeries to repair the burns from the fire. When the last of the bandages finally came off, the woman in the mirror was a stranger. Hannah's new face was breathtaking. Her skin was as smooth as silk, and her eyes looked sharper and larger than before. But the warmth that used to be in her expression was gone. Her face was like a beautiful statue made of marble, perfect, but frozen and cold. She no longer looked like the shy girl who had been traded to the mafia. She looked like a queen who was ready to start a war. But a new face was not enough. Every day, the third lady pushed Hannah to her limits. In the mornings, Hannah practiced combat. She learned how to move silently, how to strike a person's weakest points, and how to use a weapon without blinking. Her hands, which used to be soft from cooking for Ji-hoon, became covered in thin, tough calluses. In the afternoons, she sat in a dark room filled with computer screens. She studied the global stock market and learned how to destroy a company's bank account with just a few clicks. "You must kill Hannah completely," the third lady told her one evening as they watched the sunset. Hannah was weak. Hannah was a victim. "If you want your revenge, you must become someone that Ji-hoon will fear." Hannah nodded, her eyes fixed on the distant city lights of Seoul. She took her old wedding ring, the one Ji-hoon had given her without any love, and tossed it off the edge of the mountain. She watched it disappear into the dark trees below. "Hannah is dead," she said, and her voice was no longer a whisper. It was steady and powerful. "My name is Elena Vance." Elena Vance was the name of a mysterious billionaire investor from Europe. She was a woman of mystery, wealth, and power. She spent months building a fake history that no one could trace. By the end of the year, she wasn't just ready to go back, she was ready to take back everything that had been stolen from her. She packed her bags and put on a sharp, black suit. It was time to return to Seoul. Ji-hoon and Mina were celebrating their victory, thinking they had won. They had no idea that a ghost was flying toward them, and this time, she was bringing the fire with her. The golden gates of the mansion next door to Ji-hoon swung open for the first time in years. For weeks, the neighborhood had been buzzing with rumors about the mysterious billionaire, Elena Vance. Ji-hoon, once the undisputed king of the city, was now a man on the edge. His bank accounts were draining, his shipments were being seized by the police, and his rivals were laughing at him. He didn't know that every mysterious loss was a calculated strike by the woman living just 100 feet away. To save his falling empire, Ji-hoon knew he had to meet this new power player. When the invitation to Elena's housewarming party arrived, he grabbed it like a lifeline. He dressed in his finest suit, and Mina draped herself in a gown made of shimmering gold sequins, dripping in diamonds that Hannah had once owned. They walked across the manicured lawns, feeling confident that they could charm or intimidate whoever lived inside. The party was a sea of masks, expensive champagne, and the most dangerous people in the underworld. Everyone was whispering about the host. Suddenly, the music softened, and the crowd parted like the Red Sea. Elena Vance stepped onto the grand balcony. She wore a dress of midnight blue that looked like the night sky. Her face was perfect, her posture was regal, and she carried an air of command that made even the toughest gangsters lower their voices. Ji-hoon stood frozen at the bottom of the stairs. His heart gave a strange, painful thud against his ribs. He didn't know why, but looking at this woman made his breath catch. There was something about the way she held her head, or perhaps the cold intensity in her eyes, that felt like a ghost walking through his soul. He brushed the feeling aside, telling himself he was just stressed. Mina, however, didn't feel attraction, she felt a sudden, sharp chill. She clutched Ji-hoon's arm tighter, her long nails digging into his sleeve. "She looks dangerous," Mina whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Elena descended the stairs with a slow, graceful rhythm. She walked straight toward them, a polite but icy smile on her lips. She didn't look like a victim, and she didn't look like a wife. She looked like the person who owned the room and everyone in it. "Mr. Ji-hoon," Elena said. Her voice was smooth and deep, completely different from the soft whimpers Hannah used to make. She held out a hand covered in a dark silk glove. "I've heard so much about your struggling business. I thought it was time we finally met face to face." Ji-hoon took her hand, and for a split second, the world seemed to stop. He felt a spark of familiarity that terrified him, but he forced a smile. He had no idea he was shaking hands with the woman he had left to die in the fire. He thought he was meeting his savior, but he was actually looking into the eyes of his ending. The air in the ballroom was thick with the scent of expensive flowers and smoke, but as Elena moved closer to Ji-hoon and Mina, a new fragrance began to drift toward them. It was the smell of wild roses and rain, the exact same perfume Hannah had worn every day of her marriage. It was the scent Mina had stolen to taunt Hannah, the one she still wore now to prove she had won. But on Elena, the smell was stronger, richer, and somehow more haunting. Ji-hoon stood perfectly still as Elena approached. He couldn't take his eyes off her. Every time she looked at him, he felt a strange jolt of electricity, like a memory trying to claw its way out of a dark room. He searched her beautiful, marble-like face for something he recognized, but there was nothing. The nose was different, the lips were fuller, and the chin was sharper. Yet, when she tilted her head a certain way, his heart skipped a beat. It was a feeling of pure haunting, as if a ghost were standing right in front of him in the bright light of the chandelier. "You have a very striking home, Ms. Vance," Ji-hoon said, his voice unusually rough. He was trying to act like the powerful king he used to be, but his hands were slightly shaking. "And your perfume, it is very familiar." Elena let out a soft, low laugh that didn't reach her cold eyes. "It's a custom blend," she replied, her voice smooth and steady. "I find that some scents are impossible to forget, don't you think? Especially the ones that remind us of things we've lost." Standing beside him, Mina's face turned as white as a sheet. She recognized the scent instantly. It was the Rose of the Night perfume she had taken from Hannah's vanity after the wedding. But coming from this tall, powerful woman, the smell didn't feel like a victory anymore. It felt like a threat. Mina looked at Elena's smile, a sharp, knowing curve of the lips, and felt a wave of pure terror wash over her. It was the same smile Hannah had in the old family photos, but filled with a darkness that wasn't there before. Mina's breathing became shallow. She felt like the shadows in the corners of the room were stretching toward her. "Ji-hoon, I don't feel well," she whispered, clutching his arm so hard her knuckles turned white. "We should go. There's something wrong here." Elena didn't look away. She leaned in just an inch closer to Mina, the scent of the roses surrounding them like a trap. "Are you all right, dear?" "You look like you've seen a ghost," Elena whispered. Her voice was kind, but her eyes were like daggers. Mina stepped back, nearly tripping over her own gown. She didn't know how or why, but she knew the woman standing in front of her wasn't just a billionaire. She was a shadow from a grave they had dug together, and she was finally stepping into the light. Over the next few weeks, Elena became like a shadow in Ji-hoon's life, but a shadow he thought he needed. Every time his shipping company faced a problem, Elena was there with a solution. She gave him money to pay his guards and used her connections to clear his blocked trade routes. Ji-hoon began to call her every night, asking for advice. He was impressed by her brilliant mind, never realizing that she was the one who had caused the problems in the first place. He was leaning on the very hand that was preparing to push him off a cliff. While Elena played the part of a helpful partner to Ji-hoon, she played a much darker game with Mina. Every morning, a small, unmarked envelope would appear on Mina's vanity. Inside were high-quality photos that made Mina's blood run cold. One showed the twisted, blackened metal of the car at Pier 7. Another was a close-up of the exact spot where Hannah's hand had reached out from the flames. There were no notes, just the silent, burning images of the crime Mina thought she had gotten away with. Mina began to fall apart. She couldn't sleep, and every time she closed her eyes, she smelled roses and smoke. She became convinced that someone inside the house was watching her. "Who put this here?" she screamed one afternoon, waving a photo of the wreckage at a terrified maid. "Was it you? Are you working for someone?" The servants, who had already grown to dislike Mina for her cruelty, moved away from her in fear. When they whispered among themselves, Mina was sure they were plotting against her. She began to tear apart the sofa cushions and check the flower vases for hidden cameras. She even stopped eating the food the chef prepared, worried that it was being poisoned. When Ji-hoon came home from a long day of business with Elena, he didn't find a calm home. He found Mina standing in the middle of the living room with messy hair and wild eyes. "Ji-hoon, you have to fire everyone," she shrieked, clutching his arm. "They are sending me letters. They know about the pier. Someone is in the walls." Ji-hoon looked at her with a mixture of exhaustion and disgust. He looked at the evidence she held out, but Elena had been careful. The photos had been swapped for blank pieces of paper while Mina wasn't looking. To Ji-hoon, it looked like his girlfriend was holding out empty scraps of trash and talking to ghosts. "There is nothing there, Mina," Ji-hoon said coldly, pulling his arm away. "You are working yourself into a state over nothing. I have enough problems with the syndicate without you losing your mind." He walked away to call Elena, seeking the calm, steady voice of the woman who actually seemed to have her life together. In the shadows of the hallway, Elena watched them through a hidden security feed on her phone. She smiled as she saw the crack in their relationship grow wider. She wasn't just taking Ji-hoon's money anymore, she was taking his trust, one paranoid scream at a time. Elena knew that a cornered animal would always try to run. She sent a message to Mina using a burner phone, pretending to be a secret ally from the Baekho clan. The message promised Mina a chest full of gold and a private jet to escape the country, but only if she met for a secret meeting at an abandoned warehouse. Terrified of the ghosts in the mansion and Ji-hoon's growing coldness, Mina fell for the trap immediately. Late that night, Mina snuck out of the house. She didn't know that Elena was already there, hidden in the dark rafters of the warehouse with a high-tech camera. Below, Mina met with two men who were actually undercover agents hired by the third lady. They wore the symbols of the Baekho clan. "I have the codes to Ji-hoon's backup safes," Mina hissed, her eyes darting around the shadows. She looked desperate and greedy. "Just get me away from here. I don't care what happens to him. Let the rivals take his head, as long as I have my money." Elena captured every second of it. She recorded the way Mina laughed about how easy it was to trick Ji-hoon. She recorded Mina admitting that she had always planned to betray the syndicate once the bank accounts were full. It was the perfect evidence of a viper in action. However, Elena didn't run to Ji-hoon with the video. She knew that he was still blinded by his feelings. Instead, she chose a slower, more painful path. The next morning, small, anonymous video clips began appearing on the phones of Ji-hoon's most loyal bodyguards and soldiers. They saw their queen calling them stupid dogs and promising to hand their lives over to the enemy. The mood in the syndicate mansion changed instantly. When Mina walked down the hallways, the guards no longer bowed. They stared at her with hard, angry eyes. They stopped opening doors for her and, accidentally, forgot to stand watch outside her room. Ji-hoon noticed the tension, but he couldn't figure out why his men were suddenly so grumpy and disrespectful toward his girlfriend. Mina felt the walls closing in. She went to Ji-hoon to complain, but for the first time, he didn't want to hear it. He was too busy looking at a failing business report provided by Elena. Elena sat in his office, sipping tea and watching the chaos unfold on her own screen. She had turned Ji-hoon's own army against the woman he loved. The fire was spreading, and soon, there would be nowhere left for Mina to hide. The pressure on Ji-hoon's empire had finally reached a breaking point. His warehouses were empty, his ships were stuck in port, and his bank accounts were flashing red with warnings of bankruptcy. He sat in his dark office, his head in his hands, feeling the weight of a kingdom that was turning into sand. The only light in his world was Elena Vance. She had stepped in to pay his debts 3 times now, acting like a guardian angel with a bottomless purse. When Elena walked into his office that afternoon, she looked like a savior draped in expensive silk. She carried a leather briefcase and sat across from him with a look of fake concern. "Ji-hoon, she said, her voice like smooth honey. I want to help you one last time. But my partners are worried. They won't let me give you any more loans unless we have something solid to hold on to. Ji-hoon looked up, his eyes bloodshot. What do they want? I've given you everything I can. Elena leaned forward, her eyes locked onto his. The digital ledger. The master file of the syndicate. If you give me control of the ledger as collateral, I can give you enough money to rebuild everything. You'll be the king again, and Mina can finally stop worrying. The ledger was the heart of the underworld. It contained every name, every secret, and the legal deeds to every building Ji-hoon owned. Giving it away was dangerous, but Ji-hoon felt he had no choice. He trusted Elena completely. She was the only person who hadn't turned their back on him during this terrible year. He thought she was a brilliant business partner who admired his strength. He pulled a heavy, encrypted tablet from his safe and placed it on the desk. Elena pushed a stack of legal papers toward him. This is just a standard agreement, she whispered. It says that I will manage the assets until your debts are paid off. Ji-hoon didn't read the small print. He didn't see the hidden clauses that the third lady's lawyers had carefully tucked between the lines. He picked up a gold pen and signed his name with a shaky hand. He felt a sense of relief, thinking he had just saved his life. He looked at Elena and smiled, a rare look of genuine gratitude. Elena took the tablet and the signed papers, tucking them safely into her bag. For the first time, her icy smile reached her eyes, but it wasn't a smile of friendship. It was the smile of a hunter who had finally closed the trap. In that one moment, with one stroke of a pen, Ji-hoon had ceased to be a king. He had just handed the keys to his house, his money, and his very life to the forsaken wife he thought was Ash. He was now a guest in his own empire, and Elena was the one holding the door. The dining room in Elena's mansion was grander and colder than the one Hannah had once called home. The long table was covered in silver plates and crystal glasses that sparkled like ice under the chandelier. Elena sat at the very head of the table, the seat of power, watching as Ji-hoon and Mina took their places. It was an exact mirror of the dinner from a year ago, but this time, the roles were reversed. Ji-hoon looked tired and small, while Mina kept glancing nervously at the shadows. I wanted to celebrate our new partnership, Elena said, her voice echoing in the silent room. She didn't touch her food. Instead, she picked up a remote control. But before we eat, I have a little entertainment for my guests. A story about a snake and the man who was too blind to see it. She pressed a button, and the massive screen on the wall came to life. Ji-hoon's face went pale as he watched the grainy footage from the warehouse. There was Mina, clear as day, laughing as she handed over his secret codes to the men she thought were his enemies. The room filled with the sound of Mina's voice calling Ji-hoon a clueless fool, and bragging about how she had faked her illness to keep him under her thumb. Ji-hoon's fork clattered against his plate. He turned to Mina, his eyes wide with a mixture of horror and fury. Mina? What is this? Mina's face twisted. She immediately clutched her chest and began to gasp for air, her eyes rolling back. Ji-hoon, help. I can't breathe. It's my heart, the stress is killing me. She's lying, she made that video with AI. She began to slump toward the floor, waiting for Ji-hoon to catch her and comfort her like he always did. But Elena didn't look worried. She didn't even stand up. Instead, she pulled a folder from beside her plate and tossed it onto the table. Don't bother with the performance, Mina. It's boring now. The folder slid across the wood and stopped in front of Ji-hoon. He opened it and saw years of medical records. They showed that Mina had never had a heart condition. They showed that every emergency had been a lie, and every pill she took was nothing but sugar. Elena laughed, a sharp, cold sound that made the hair on Ji-hoon's neck stand up. She was never sick, Ji-hoon. She just wanted a front row seat to watch you destroy the only person who actually loved you. Mina stopped gasping instantly. She sat up straight, her fake tears drying as she realized her mask had been ripped off. Ji-hoon looked from the records to the video, and then at the beautiful, icy woman at the head of the table. For the first time, he saw the trap he had walked into. He had lost his money, his men, and now his heart was breaking for the second time. But the biggest shock was still coming. Ji-hoon felt like the world was spinning. He looked at Mina, who was no longer pretending to be a victim, and then back at the video of her betrayal. The woman he had protected, the one he had ruined his life for, was nothing but a thief. He felt a deep, hollow ache in his chest. In his moment of total despair, he turned toward Elena. She was the only one left. He reached out across the table, his hand trembling as he tried to touch hers. "Elena," he choked out, his voice cracking. "I've been such a fool. Please, you're the only one I can trust now. Help me fix this. Stay with me." Elena didn't move. She didn't offer a warm smile or a comforting word. Instead, she pulled her hand away as if his touch were poisonous. She stood up slowly, her tall shadow stretching across the table like a dark cloud. The silence in the room was so heavy it felt hard to breathe. "You still don't get it, do you, Ji-hoon?" she asked. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the air like a knife. She picked up a white silk napkin and dipped it into a glass of water. With slow, steady movements, she began to wipe at the skin just behind her ear and along her jawline. Ji-hoon watched, confused, as the heavy waterproof makeup came away. Beneath the beige cream, a thin, jagged scar appeared. It was a faded mark from a fire, the kind of mark left by a burning car at a dark pier. Ji-hoon's breath hitched. That scar. He had seen the flames lick that exact spot on the night he turned his back. He looked into her eyes, and suddenly, the Elena mask shattered. He saw the girl who used to wait for him with dinner. He saw the woman who had begged for his mercy in the cellar. "Hannah," he whispered, his face turning the color of ash. "No, it can't be. You died. I saw the car explode." Elena leaned down until her face was just inches from his. The smell of her rose perfume, the scent he had once ignored, filled his lungs. Her eyes weren't filled with the love he remembered. They were empty. "A person who betrays their king doesn't deserve a grave," she whispered. The words hit Ji-hoon like a physical blow. Those were the exact, cruel words he had spat at her while she was locked in the dark. He realized then that she hadn't come back to save his business. She had come back to finish what he started. She had watched him fall for her new face just so she could watch his heart break when he found out the truth. He wasn't looking at a business partner, he was looking at the ghost of the woman he had murdered, and she had finally come to collect her debt. The silence in the room was broken by the sound of heavy boots. The doors to the dining hall swung open, and Ji-hoon's own elite guards marched in. For a moment, Ji-hoon felt a surge of hope, thinking they were there to protect him. But the guards didn't look at him. They walked straight to Elena and bowed their heads in perfect unison. "The transition is complete, madam," the head guard said. "The syndicate belongs to you now." Ji-hoon gasped, his eyes darting to the legal papers he had signed earlier. He realized now that he hadn't just signed a loan, he had signed a death warrant for his career. Elena stood up, her cold blue dress shimmering like a winter lake. She signaled to the guards, pointing at Mina, who was trying to sneak toward the back exit. "Wait. No." Mina screamed as two guards grabbed her by the arms. "Ji-hoon, save me." But Ji-hoon didn't move. He watched in a daze as the police, led by the third lady's contacts, entered the room. They had the video of the warehouse and the evidence of the rocket attack at Pier 7. Mina kicked and yelled, her face twisted in an ugly mask of rage, as they dragged her out in handcuffs. The snake had finally been caught in her own trap. Then, the guards turned to Ji-hoon. "Sir, you are trespassing on private property," the head guard said, his voice cold. "You have 5 minutes to leave this mansion with only the clothes you are wearing." Ji-hoon collapsed to his knees. The great king of the underworld was now a man with nothing, no money, no house, and no pride. He crawled toward Elena, his tears hitting the expensive carpet. "Hannah, please," he begged, his voice trembling. "I was wrong. I was blinded. I'll do anything. I'll be your servant, your dog, just don't leave me like this. I still love you." Elena looked down at him. A year ago, these words would have made her cry with joy. But now, she felt nothing but the slight chill of the air conditioning. She didn't feel angry, and she didn't feel happy. She simply felt empty. "You don't love me, Ji-hoon," she said, her voice as calm as a frozen pond. "You only love the power I have now. You left a wife to burn, but you forgot that ash can't be hurt by fire anymore." She turned her back on him and walked toward the grand front doors. As she stepped out into the night air, she saw the third lady leaning against her black car, a proud smile on her lips. Behind her, the guards were tossing Ji-hoon out onto the gravel driveway, slamming the gates shut behind him. Elena Vance didn't look back. She climbed into the car and looked at her reflection in the window. The girl who waited in the cellar was gone. The girl who cried for a husband was gone. She was the new queen of the city, and her empire was just beginning. Do you want to see the first queen of the mafia world? If I get first 20 comments, I will share the story of how she ruled the mafia underworld.